we're going to start the panel now. I'd like to just say a huge thanks to Ger Ryan, our moderator, to Dearbhla Walsh, acclaimed director, to Madeline Di Nonno again, it was fantastic in the presentation, and to Jennie Stacey from Brown Bag, which is just around the corner. So the panel discussion is on the theme of innovations, and afterwards there will be time for a Q&A. So if anyone has any questions during the discussion, maybe just jot them down for the end, but we will have time for them then after. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. That was a fantastic presentation, Madeline. It was just eye-opening. And it's something about, the unconscious gender bias that we all kind of feel, but just to see it up there was wonderful, because that's when you can move forward. And I'd like to start off the conversation by asking Dearbhla and Jennie, what you thought of this presentation, and were you blown away by it, or what did you think, or were you aware of it, or... I'll start with, asking Dearbhla.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Well done on getting into a room of red this early in the morning. What's the theory on the colour temperature red? They used to have it in the cinema, so it kind of makes everything soothing and calming and makes you open and susceptible. That was the idea of the red velvet curtains in theatre. So your eyes have warmed up the temperature and the old cinemas. So you were staring at a red space for quite a while, and it kind of warms the retina so that when the curtains divide, you are open and susceptible to what you're about to hear and see.
Wow.
So in this...
Hey! Never knew that.
So in this room of red, this womb of red, it feels like a very safe and welcoming place. So I found it really interesting because, well, as you say, it's science, it's facts. And that is... Because the whole... gender debate, gender bias is you have to... I think you reference quite interestingly about it can't feel personal. Because you're dealing with people who are multi-million, dollar movies, and it is about so much of this industry is about politics, and the politics, obvious politics, but politics of people, and and that's what that's about, and the unconscious conscious prejudice we all have as men and as women, very much. And I am kind of constantly learning and shocked at myself at my own unconscious prejudice, and so when it is picked up, or when I pick it up myself, or there's something in your gut saying there's something not quite right. So, the very obvious thing for me is, where my starting point is always reading the script, or working with the writer, and you respond to a story. You're not responding to the science of, sometimes I do respond to the science in terms of it's a visual effects explosive movie, and that either interests me or doesn't. But I think when you talked about background actors, I suppose I've just finished a series that's for Amazon that's just going out in the UK and about to go out in the States, and the choices you make about characters and background, which are very subtle, do actually make a difference. So, for example, there's an after-show party in The Pianist. It was just The Pianist, and the obvious choice was a man, and we changed that. Like, the designer came to me and said, I have a friend who's a pianist, and it's 1947 Paris, it's the world of Dior, and we changed, because you have to be historically correct as well, but we changed that to a female character. She was kind of cross-dressed as a man, and it was right to the scene and kind of the people that were mixing in that area. Or on the streets of Paris, a lot of our approach in terms of the design was bringing a lot of the Robert Doisneau or the Bresson or life pictures to life, because I was looking for a look of authenticity. So literally basing it on the fact of what was on the streets and bring them to life. And again, having increased female characters there. Then at a technical level, I had to recreate Paris 47 in Swansea, which you won't know where Swansea is, but as you can see, the audience do. Swansea is like, with no offence to any Welsh people in the audience, but it's the armpit of Wales. And And it is a pretty bleak place. And when I took on the job, I thought we'd have much more in Paris. I got to shoot for 2 days in Paris, and 10 weeks in very wet, grim, grey Swansea. It makes Ireland look like Costa del Brava. I mean, I've never actually. So apart from the challenge of the weather and shooting Paris, there are no locations because the Swansea was bombed during the war. So there's only one period building. Also, the story it's post-war Paris and loosely inspired by the story of the New Look and the rebirth of haute couture in post-war Paris. So the world of Dior, but it's all coming at it through family, and it's kind of, I suppose, the easiest way. It's kind of what Mad Men was to the advertising industry. It is, hopefully, it aspires to be to the world of fashion. So our extras, like literally the men look like they come down from the mountains, but things like we had costumes, so we had to really cast people who were the size of the costumes, etc. And but there was pressure because all of these things are financial. Our financial choices about crewing as much as possible from Wales, in the same way that we in Ireland have benefited hugely from American shows coming in, and I mean that's one of the ways I certainly got a break working on Tudors, and so I was quite surprised. No, not surprised. Like say meeting HODs, say my sound team had no females on their team. Or the camera department. So things like that where you can influence in a subtle way, just comment and, actually I would want you, like, how come you have, first of all, no females on your team? And second of all, you should have, and for just a reason of you should be training men and women. And I've worked with lots of brilliant boom operators. And also then, of course, because we're dealing with a show that is about women, men and women undressing, but obviously, particular to the shows. So sensitivity with artists as well. Again, looking at some key roles and asking that question all the time. If you change the name from male to female, what does that do? Which is always fascinating. I can't tell you how many scripts that I get that I go, this is interesting, but it would be so much more interesting if the character was female, because it throws up much more interesting dilemmas. Like the world is way too familiar the way it is at the moment. And I'm about to do a show for Netflix, a new show for Marvel, and I'm scared stiff and I may never work again at the end of it. But it really is a very conscious decision to push myself out of my comfort zone. And it's the Punisher. And it's kind of one of the darkest characters. I mean, it would have been more fun to do Jessica. But I'm constantly, even as a female director, just fighting being pigeonholed and fighting being boxed as kind of the girly drama director. So I do very, very different work, from drama to dance to kind of in the middle of editing a dance film at the moment for 2016 on Roger Casement, and I did Hosier's last video for Cherry Wine about domestic abuse with Saoirse Ronan. So it's constantly, kind of trying to push yourself in terms of your own work as well, make choices that aren't obvious and predictable. But I'm really scared stiff, but looking forward to what the experience of working with Marvel will be like, and working in a world, they are male characters, and there are obviously female characters as well, but the main protagonist is. And I said to the producer, I think you're really picking the wrong director for this. I don't think I'm the right person at all. And he says, no, you're exactly the right person. We're looking for drama, not action. And so it will be interesting, and also the power as a director I'll have in terms of influencing what that show will feel like. So I suppose it's a very long answer to say the subtlety. She's given us the facts, but the subtlety, it is absolutely choices, and that is all our responsibilities. But certainly as a director, and as I say, and I exec produce the show for Amazon as well. The choices you make about equality, and about inclusivity, and just asking the question, what would happen if, just changing the prism. And as I said, I'm very aware of constantly questioning myself about that as well. So to have those, to have this kind of, these as facts is very interesting, and I'm definitely going to take a few of your lines to.
Oh, I worked on the movies Punisher when it was Artisan, before it was Lionsgate, and you take a character, and Melissa had a lot of that, taking on Jessica Jones, and she actually had to introduce Luke Cage into Jessica Jones before the Luke Cage show was coming, and that wasn't going to be her show, and so there's a lot of consideration there. But when you think about the Punisher, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Punisher, but
I think you have to be 12 years old and male. I'm finding so far. I've suddenly become the most popular aunt in Ireland.
But you have to think about his motivation. He was driven by pain and loss and love of his wife and his children. So I think that's kind of the most sensitive kind of male there can be. And so I think there's a big opportunity with that origin story. So I think it's great to have a female leading that story, because you look at the heart of the character, and that's what you want. You want to see that a man can love and show love and affection and all of that. So I think even though the outcome is vigilant, being a vigilante and etc., but it was driven by
loss and pain.
Right, exactly.
And this showrunner has set it in, as I say, people returning from Iraq, and the society keeping them on the periphery. But I think it's kind of one of the most overtly kind of macho, it seems, on the outside shows, but it's exactly that. I think that's why the producers exactly know what we want is this kind of...
they want the drama. They want the real belly of it, the belly of the story, That's fascinating. Sorry, I didn't introduce Dearbhla properly. She's done some amazing work. It's done. My first time watching was Little Dorrit, which I talked to you about. That opening scene just utterly drew me in and blew me away, and she's won an Emmy and BAFTA and an IFTA, and I apologise, I just didn't do the introduction very well.
What's the Amazon show that's coming out?
It's called The Collection. It's by Oliver Goldstick, who wrote Pretty Little Liars and Desperate Housewives. I mean, you may know him. I mean, I don't want to hog, because I know Jennie, but I would be interesting to come back to, serialization, and actually... It's because ultimately, whatever technology, it's about the stories being told and who's writing the stories and who's telling the stories, and no matter what we do, Anyhow, sorry, Jennie.
No, and I'd like to ask, if you can remember what the question was, I'd like to ask Jennie Stacey from Brown Bag Films, and they're just geniuses as far as I'm concerned. We talked earlier on about the very first Give Up Your Elves Sins, which still makes me hoot with laughter. It's just gorgeous. And I'd like to ask you the same about, I heard you talking earlier that you do actually have a tracker. And I know you also have a presentation, so.
Well, I think, it was, to see the data up there on the screen is kind of shocking, but sort of invigorating, especially when you see the box office figures and you see people are going to see women in films, and they're going to see female leads, going to see female characters, female stories, directors and writers. So once you can put that data in front of people and say, as you were saying, it's a myth that women don't go to the cinema. It's a myth that women don't want to see women on screen. All we have to do is change it, and the people in this room, by making very simple choices, can do so. So we've been in Brown Bag, myself and some of my colleagues on the kind of the directors and art directors and creators in the studio. We've been familiar with the Gina Davis Institute for years now, and the C. Jane animation that you did a few years ago, you should check it out if you haven't seen it. It's just a very simple way of getting across some of the data that you've talked about today, and it really sparked something in us and made us look at what we're doing, because we make shows primarily for very young children. We go right, and families, we make short films and TV series, but we're most known really for our preschool shows. So really, from the age of 2 to 6, that incredibly important time in a kid's life, where you want them to see characters that reflect themselves. You want to see themselves on screen, and as you were saying, Ger, we have, talking about kind of technology and how we can use it to sort of innovate in unusual ways. We in Brownback, we use a tracker called Shotgun, which is our production tracker, and we make CG animation, so it's incredibly, file heavy and incredibly complicated and technical, and so all our files are tracked using this tracker. Every artist, that's their screen in the morning, when they come in, and so they track their work. But one of my colleagues, Nicky Phelan, who's one of our directors, he directed Granny O'Grim actually, and has directed a number of our series. He, after seeing See Jane, kind of felt a bit smug. He was directing a series called Bing, which is it's for a BBC series for very little kids. It's our youngest show. And he was thinking, Bing is the lead character is a male bunny, a little boy bunny. But most of his friends are female. The kind of carer characters in the show are female. And he thought, yeah, it's pretty balanced. And using Shotgun, he thought, well, actually, we have access to a lot of the data which you mightn't have easily in live action. We can look and see how many characters we have that are female, how many shots they appear in, how many lines of dialogue they have. And it's all there if you take the time to go through it. So he, as he said himself, went down a rabbit hole and came over to me we were working late one evening and said, look what I found. I'm mortified. I thought we had 5 shows in production at the time, and the show that he had been working on with this lead bunny, it was only 36% female characters on screen. And he thought, but that's straight down the middle. It looks on paper as if you have 50% characters. And then he looked at another show of ours, The Octonauts, which is a big BBC show, and it's on a Disney in the States. And it's an ensemble cast, and 2 of the female characters, one's a mechanic, they're real go-getter roles. But they don't leave the vehicles. They don't go, they're not the doers. It wasn't intentional. It was originally, that it was going to be 3 lead male characters. It wasn't going to be an ensemble show. 16% female presence in that one in terms of screen time. And then one of our shows, which is probably our biggest show, called Doc McStuffins, which is a big Disney show. Yeah. And, talking about female representation and diversity on screen, that's one I could talk about maybe later. But that is, for kids' shows, they're very much branded. This is a girl's show. This is a boys' show. A lot of that is driven by toys and merchandising. So the less scrupulous broadcasters will look at a show and they won't be thinking, who's my lead? And they'll be thinking, what toy aisle does this go in? And we all know what toy aisles, it's girls and boys. And Doc McStuffins is a girl show. Our lead is a girl. She's purple and pink and sparkly. And that was the only one of our shows that was 50-50 between female and males, which was interesting given that it is seen as a girl show that will be for girls. And if boys watch, well, that's nice, but really... and it turns out it's actually the only one of our shows that in terms of audience figures, it's nearly even boys and girls watching it. And the boys adore Doc McStuffins just as much as the little girls. They're at that age before they start going, girls, and it's so important. That character, she's a doctor in her. She's a small child who is a doctor for toys and stuffed animals, and out of her playhouse. She's got a clinic in the back garden. And her mom is a doctor. Her dad's a homemaker. She's a little brother. And it's been kind of... It just woke something in people. She's also an African-American character. And that in itself, it shouldn't be revolutionary, has been, because there were no black dolls for girls. And there certainly were no little girls being doctors on screen. And it had an impact that was immediate. We started seeing it on social media as soon as it was on screen, people wanting to talk to us about it in the States. And an amazing doctor in the States called Dr. Maisha Taylor, she said seeing it was really impactful for her. She had had no role models as a child. She'd always wanted to be a doctor. And here finally was a black girl, an African-American girl, being a doctor. And she got in touch with other female physicians in the States. They then, off the back of this show, which is amazing, I mean, it really is Saturday morning cartoons, formed the Artemis Medical Society for African American female physicians in the States. There's now around 3,500, or there were last time I looked. Doc McStuffins has gone to the White House. Michelle Obama has, done a voice. And it has just, been incredible in terms of having representation for small, African American children to look at. And even simple things like look at, she has hair like mine, I don't have straight blonde hair, and she does her hair the same way I do, which is a very big deal for 4-year-old girls who are getting their hair done in the morning to go out to school and like battling with their pigtails or their afros or whatever it might be. Very simple things like that are so important for young children to be able to see on screen. So that was an eye-opener for us. And it means that I work in development, so just,
That is myself. Really exciting. It's the power of the visual. What you'd been saying earlier, everything starts with script.
Yeah.
And I understand that cliff. I'm kind of at the bottom of it and climbing my way back up, but it's part of the cyclical thing of being an actor. That there are times that, but I love that if you can see it, be it, and that to me, because when I grew up, the role models watching movies were, Barbara Stanwyck and Betty Davis, and really strong, powerful, fantastic women, and then it all kind of just went, then suddenly it was like the 70s were such exploitation movies, Some movies were amazing, but in terms of female representation, it's very important that we see ourselves. And in the media in general, that hypersexualization of young women, of children, I think is extraordinarily damaging to your self-esteem, because you're looking at these images that are unobtainable. Utterly unobtainable. And then you look at, dramas, films, whatever, and again, it's unobtainable. You can't relate to, these perfect people, these perfect looking people, these, extraordinarily thin people, and you're kind of going, do they eat? But when you're talking about young kids watching this all the way up, it's so important. And to have a tool like this where you can go along and it's facts, figures, science, it's not emotional, it's not, the feminists are, up in arms again. It really is about unconscious, because I have unconscious gender bias. And that thing about reading scripts, I used to read scripts and go, they're just jobs. Why are they all men? So you'd read something about a police station and it'd be, and again, it would make no difference to change one or two to women. You wouldn't have to change any dialogue or anything about it other than gender. Just to people the office with more women, and actually it would make for quite interesting characters. Not to change the dialogue, just the name, Sorry, I've gone on a little bit too long. That's my little bugbear.
It was interesting to see that kind of recurring 17% that Gina, I saw her speak at Kidscreen earlier this year, that she spoke about things like crowd scenes. It's like you said, over 200 movies are all the first ADs doing the same thing. How we reach this sort of balanced number, this magic number of 17%, visibility of women in crowd scenes. What is it about, women that should be seen 17% of the time? It's just a very unusual kind of thing to think about, especially if you're looking around, and obviously it's 50-50 in all our lives. And like for us in animation, our characters might be mad monsters, aliens, bunnies, rabbits. There is absolutely no need for them to be male or female a lot of the time, especially in crowd scenes where you just might have random, weird-looking characters. So we it's quite a simple choice for us. So it's one that we really owe it to ourselves to do, and just check ourselves all the time.
Can I just, because somebody talked about it over coffee there, and I thought, and it was about on-screen time, and why the percentage is so low on screen of women. And television is obviously, it's another golden age of television at the moment with we're beyond box sets now. It's streaming and binge watching. And America's led the way in that, although I think Britain and Ireland, certainly Britain has such a great culture of drama. And with television has come the power of the writer, the showrunner, which is different to the movies, which has been, traditionally either director powered or the studio producers. And in TV, it's the showrunner, and I've worked with a lot of different showrunners, some of them where as the director you only get as far as director's cut and you're paid to walk away. And the collection which I've just done has been a hybrid because they wanted specifically a marriage of the British and American system. So as the director, I was all the way to the end, which was quite difficult for the showrunner because he wasn't used to that. So it was a very interesting, all the way kind of, quite political, but I mean, it was a good relationship, but there were battles because the showrunner is used to. And one of the things about screen time and my experience of working, why is there so little of say women's screen time, apart from the fact that maybe they're not cast there, but let's just talk about something where they are cast, is a showrunner who's the writer traditionally I suppose I'm saying in the edit suite is where the next battleground is, and where the story is written again and retold, and kind of 9 times out of 10 my experience is that the showrunner, I mean the sort of cutting I'm interested in is emotional cutting, which is about reactions, about the subtext of a story. And so as opposed to watching the person speaking, I want to watch the person listen, because that's where the drama is in the reaction. And it is extraordinary, the power of the showrunner coming in. They want to see their words in close-up, and it's the kind of classic commissioner's note in an edit suite: cut to the close-up, kind of let me see the person speaking. And it's like, we don't need to see the person speaking, we can hear. What's interesting is, because nobody ever says what they mean, and nobody ever, in real life, and so a deeper, more interesting dramatic scene is watching, and that a character who has nothing to say in a scene can actually steal a scene. I mean, I've had an example in The Tudors where Henry VIII and which queen? The second queen, Anne Boleyn. She was basically on her way out, and I kind of use this scene as an example when I'm doing kind of director's classes about how you can take a conventional, boring 2-person scene at a kitchen table and make it interesting, and that they're always find a way of bringing a third character into the scene, so you're not left with bish bosh, the two people talking. So Henry and Anne are at the table, but I've got a servant in the background, and I just used it as an example of a shooted close up of that servant when I was doing the scene throughout, and then in the editing how you can control what's going on in the scene through that servant watching and what's that doing. But the battles you fight in the edit suite, and that I think is kind of interesting with on the screen time, about who are we looking at and why. And also the star system of an actor who has control and power, who is, why am I on the last page? And I just shared the story, and I just think it might be interesting in terms of being a practitioner and about gender equality. I showed a cut to it's an ensemble piece, but the actor I adored working with, and showed him a cut of the show, and he, was like many actors, lots of big insecurity, and when he came back to me, said, "Oh God, Dearbhla, was there something wrong with my acting? You're in a lot of my scenes, you're not on me when I'm speaking, you're on somebody else. Like, was there something wrong with what I was doing?" And I said, "No, Richard, it's emotional cutting. It is being on you for the reaction and not on the action." But really, even that, his sense of it was how you value somebody's part is how much, they're on screen and they're speaking. And I think it interesting about what you said about Bunny's show. Yeah. Like who's writing that? And that director was surprised that, oh my God, we've got and yet there aren't many women. Who's writing that show?
We do have. As with everything in animation, other than in production, there are more men and that's reflected across the script. So we would, when we're doing a full season of a show, there'll be 52 episodes, 11 minutes. So there will be women in it. It's just really, it's talk, it's action and lines. So the characters are there, the female characters are there, but they're maybe in the background, or they're responding, but they're not initiating the action. And it's been, really has been, not to big it all up, but honestly, it has had a real impact on us, the work of the Gina Davis Institute, because some of our new shows that we're working on right now would skew that, those figures massively. 2 of our main shows now are female-led shows, and the same director is working on one of them at the moment, and he said it's the other way around. Most of her friends are girls, most of her moms had got a huge role, and so it's really just kind of being aware of it. And you might sound pedantic in the room, going back to it, but I think until we have to do that, we have to check ourselves constantly and go, well, let's look back here. Why doesn't she have the line? Give the line to her. And once we keep doing that, it'll become normalized, and then we don't have to ask the question again. And that, for that particular director and another director that I'm working with right now, we've developed 2 of her shows. One's just gone into production. They both have female lead characters, and it's now clicked to the point where it's just shorthand between us now. She just will be like, no, female, no, girl, and it just becomes normal.
It's an added thing to your checklist that is
exactly
on top of, what the schedule is and what the budget, it's in there, and the million things that, must check.
Yeah, it's like what you've been saying. We all have our unconscious bias, but I spent a lot of from the 70s up, just counting. I'd look at the world stage and all these men discussing how the world was going to move forward. And I'd go, 4, 5, 6. There was always a woman somewhere, and you'd count. And I would do that when I'd be watching TV series. I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was just automatic. I didn't do it for any reason other than for myself. It was like, where are the women? Because I grew up in a house full of women. And so it was, where are they? Where are they? And again, in offices, you go, and it's now 2016 and I'm still counting. I don't do it as often because I am very hopeful. I see in the younger generation in particular, God, those women have balls. They're brilliant. You know what I mean? They're confident. They're creative, and that will, and they're writing and they're producing and they're directing, and it is about writing the stories, and it's about us all checking our own bias and ticking those boxes and going, why can't that be a female? Why can't, and again, the other side, why can't it be a male? Just change the names. You don't have to change
black. Why can't it be Irish?
Exactly. Transgender. Somebody mentioned earlier on, would this program in the future, obviously, it's an ongoing thing, but there's so many different areas now in life that we're encountering. And so transgender, all kinds of lives that people are living, they want to see reflected. Not just in niche things, but every day. Just normalize everything so that everybody can see themselves reflected back without it being diluted, Because good storytelling doesn't dilute, it just enhances,
And I think that starts with seeing people just not on the screen, but seeing women in those roles and making themselves a little bit more visible. Animation, as I was saying, has been traditionally male-dominated, vastly so. And in our studio, we have females in lead roles. I lead up development. Our head of TV production is a woman. Our head of technology is a woman. The head of business, legal, all women. So, which is wonderful. But for a very long time, the artists themselves were vastly, predominantly male. We only had 3 very senior female artists, and I know some of you here are in Women in Animation. We set that up a couple of years ago now, 3 years ago now, I think, just to look at why the girls are going to art school in the same way as they're going to film school, in the same numbers, absolutely even, sometimes even more women than men. So why aren't they going into the jobs, or why are they dropping out after a short period of time? And for women in animation, a lot of what we're doing is just social settings, having a drink, having some social events, so people could meet women, see them. We do panel events, so you can see people in these jobs and know that it's possible, especially in Ireland, where we don't have the big Hollywood, the massive studios like DreamWorks and Pixar, and here it might be kind of interesting for people to know that some of the shows they're seeing on Disney are directed by women here in Smithfield, and I don't think people realise that. So it's just trying to show people you can do it. And over the last 3 years, even there's been a huge increase in women coming to our events and students coming and asking questions and being more vocal. And just last week, I heard that our studio is now 50-50 male and female, which is, we have to queue for the toilets now, which is other than that, it's great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's changing. It's definitely changing.
I'd like to mention as well, what really kind of gave me a huge lift, and I think it gave a lot of people in the arts world a lift, was the Waking the Feminists movement, and the ants here. Thank you. It was just, it's part of a, what's the word, zeitgeist? It's a time, it's an idea whose time has come, and I think it has made people feel, women in particular, this old woman here, sitting here, I just felt, yes, hallelujah, fantastic. Because it is just about looking at it, and to see that presentation you gave earlier was just, facts. Yay! Because that's what's needed. A real cold, kind of unemotional look at, and a really good business sense. Really good. So I actually think, we should all donate to the Gina Davis Institute if we can. Is there a page on the website that we can donate? Excellent. Because,
Yeah. No donation is too large.
But it would be good, to actually, if anybody has any money to spare, to actually just click on that and just give a little donation. I'm sure every little bit helps, because I think it's a really important tool that could be used in every area. Sports, I was thinking about even sports funding and things that we haven't really been looking at. We've been looking at the arts and stuff, but across the board, it's only fair that if you're a taxpayer, you're 50% of holding up the sky, you should get a good stab at whatever funding is going. It shouldn't be so heavily towards one gender or another.
One thing I didn't have a chance to tell you, I mentioned a little bit. So we're partners with J. Walter Thompson, which is a very large advertising agency, if you heard of it, actually out of the UK. And we've been working with them for almost 2 years. And did anyone, it was BBC, did anyone see, it was called Her Story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Gina was in one of the episodes. That was J. Walter Thompson, actually. And so they have something called a Women's Index. And the first time they did it, they were interviewing 4,300 women in 9 countries. And we said, well, can you interject some questions about impact? Because it's one thing to say, this is what we're seeing, but then it's something else to say, this is why it matters. And so we put in a few questions around the impact of portrayals in TV and film on women. And the data that came out was so rich that they have now expanded the Women's Index to 7,300 women, and they actually did another 1,000 just US, UK, which is going to be coming out. But the point is that across the 9 countries, about 61% of the women said that a portrayal in TV and film influenced them to be more ambitious, to pursue a certain career. And what was very interesting is a quarter said because of a portrayal they saw in TV and film, they left an abusive relationship. And they literally are just, I was on the phone with them yesterday, finishing up this other mega study, and we're figuring out how we're going to release it and where, who, what. So that's the so what. I mean, there is a even though it's social science, there is a correlation to what we see and in pop culture and how it affects our behavior.
Exactly. Yeah, very important. That's why we do it. As an actor, you become so aware of an audience response, and especially if you work in television, because that's in people's homes, it's in their living room. And people who have worked on, say, long-running dramas or soaps, as they're called, deal with that every single day, the effect of the storyline that they're doing, you know, and it has a huge emotional resonance for those watching at times. It's their life they're seeing, or, you know. So, yeah, it's really, really, really important. I was wondering, you have some clips. Would you like to show them, or...?
I think we can leave it, unless you got. I think you've probably had enough of Saturday morning cartoons. I think the conversation's kind of.
Should we throw it open to? Yes, you know, please. Questions. Oh. Do you want me to run over with the mic? Here, I'll do this.
It's really interesting to talk about all of this in terms of Ireland, because, I mean, education and having the facts is really what we need, because we haven't even started. These discussions are so new to us, and it's amazing. And when you have the facts, you know you can debate. But it's not just about the facts. It's also about creatively taking back the gaze, because traditionally in cinema, at least, it's been a male gaze. Traditionally, the director is male, even if they're telling the female story, so it's seen from the male point of view. And as Jill Soloway said in Toronto this year, she gave a brilliant speech where she said, it's wrestling back that gaze, going at it from another point of view, because, I mean, basically, we are 50% of the population, so, I mean, we're not a minority. Women are not a minority, so, and that goes through from education right up. But in terms of Ireland, Waking the Feminists, to me, has been, you know, that juncture where now we're allowed to debate it, even though everybody would have known unconsciously it was there, or that, you know, there's, you know, less female directors getting work. I wouldn't say there's less female directors out there. There's less female directors getting work. But what we don't do in the film industry here is get together. What you do in theatre and for Waking the Feminists is every department gets together. You know, nobody here does that, because film is very hierarchical, and it's very, very, it's got an army-like structure, and it's very hard through the departments, so that, you know, sound departments here are, majority of them, it's male. Majority, you know, in camera is male. And I know what you're doing, and Gina Davis is fantastic, but I think there's an awful lot of work we can do behind the camera as well. And I'm wondering if you are going to tie up with, or do you tie up with people doing research behind the camera? You obviously do in the States, do you, Madeline?
So we do, and I did present the research of what's happening behind the scenes. So we always track that, if that was the question. Yeah. We always track the percentages of writers, producers, directors. And in the United States, we push out maybe about 500 films a year. And going back to what you were saying about the new golden age of television, I can't even think about how many, when you think about pilots and all the buyers now, I mean, it could be 3 times more the output in TV. So TV does much better in the numbers in terms of behind the camera. It's much higher. And of course it's going to change with every season. Whereas in film, you've never, ever, ever had double digits when it comes to female directors. Ever. Ever. So, you know, in TV, you have a different director almost for every episode. So there's a lot more opportunity in TV than film.
And there's a huge amount of my experience. I mean, a lot of my work is out of Britain, but I mean, it's predominantly female at executive level, and HODs. Yes, you're right about camera department. I mean, I think I've just done one show, maybe one show with a female DOP, and but you look for those people, but in the end, you give the job to the best person. But there obviously needs to, you need to increase the number of people out there. I mean, I've just worked with the production designer on the collection, kind of brilliant woman, and her team was predominantly female. But in television, I think it is, my experience in TV drama is, you don't even think about it so often that you have to think about it sometimes at more specific levels. But I really found the difference between being in London and Wales huge, in what that, and I think my experience of, being, in Dublin, I mean, apart from the obvious camera department, although I haven't worked with a DOP in this country yet who hasn't got women in their department, but editors, I mean, women editors, it's an incredible wealth of female editors here and directors, and it is definitely very different in the movies.
And in terms of networking, there's forums, I think, outside to join women in film and television. Which is a brilliant networking for all, not just in front of camera, but for all aspects of. I'll come back to you, and I'll just go here.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so I do apologise. I think it's easy often to point the finger and criticise the things that are going wrong, and perhaps they're more evident. But it's just a recent example that I was really impressed by. I don't know if anybody has been watching, and television is an easier example and an easier industry to penetrate, but has anybody been watching Queen Sugar on the Oprah Winfrey Network? It's directed by Ava DuVernay, and they collaborated on the project, but every episode is directed by a woman. They have also endeavoured to have what they called a hashtag inclusive crew. So their crew is entirely diverse from various different elements and backgrounds and skin colour and race, and it has really impacted the depth of the story, and I think the brilliance of the material that has been on screen. Another thing that I was just going to comment on, from the Bath Film Festival, they developed a methodology called the F rating, and it's how they examine films, and I think it's a really worthy tool to kind of implement and introduce in anything that I've been watching. So they judge it based on having a female writer, having a female director, and having women having an important conversation on screen. So it's a direct involvement of the Bechdel test. And I know there was comments brought up as regards to including various different stories, particularly transgender, and I think that's really important. But also, if we could keep in mind disability, for so often people with disabilities have been spoken for by their carers, by family members, and I stand at the height of 3'5" tall, and whilst there has been a revolution with people like Peter Dinklage and Warwick Davis, my question is, where are the little women? They don't exist.
Well, just one thing on that. So in the United States, people with disabilities are the largest minority, actually. And every event that we do, every panel that we do, everything that we do, there's always someone who is either a subject matter expert or an actor or a writer or producer. We always make sure when we look at, and that's a whole nother subject, is who's on a panel, and we always make sure disabilities is baked into it all the time, no matter what we do.
Oh, yes.
Back to the show, sorry. Back to the story and where the story comes from. Sorry. I just wanted to know what the breakdown of writers in writers' rooms are, especially for you, Dearbhla, because obviously it is great that there's a lot of the story needs to come from the owned experience, and if we don't have more women in those writers' rooms and actually show running them, because sometimes they can be in the writers' room and then it's to one side, or scripting something that has been already set up and a storyline that has already been created, we aren't going to have balance on screen. So I want to know what you find the makeup of the story rooms and the showrunners that you've worked with, and across animation as well.
So just two answers to that question, because I think the camera department and sound department are kind of obvious, and kind of for obvious reasons sometimes as well, even though, of course, I stand corrected. But I would certainly say, as a director, where there is an absolute absence, and I actually don't genuinely understand it in the same way, and I have lots of writer friends and have this discussion, is how absent female writers are. And they are definitely absent. I mean, there is a conscious decision, again, I think by commissioners looking for writers, female writers, because there's so much pressure. I mean, I've just come back from the States in LA last month, and everybody's talking about gender imbalance, and it was like they were so almost bizarrely thrilled to see me walk through the door, and oh my God, a female director, that we can, but the absence of female writers is, I genuinely don't understand it in the same way that I understand sound and film, because I had a company for a while with another woman. She was the writer and I was the director and producer, and writing in writers' rooms is 9 to 5, but it's not 9 to 5 in the same way, in that the imagination is turning all of the time, and we're getting up and writing in the middle of the night. So while it should have a discipline, it isn't. The demands on it aren't as disciplined as other departments are. So where are they? I mean, I know there are people there at ground level, and there are the ideas. And I mean, I worked in RT for a while. My big thing was, why dramas would start and never keep moving, is people have to be allowed to make mistakes. And I think and that's in drama, because it's so expensive, again, speaking very much from an Irish perspective rather, is all this drama is more expensive to make than anything else, and then we fuck up all of the time, like, oh my God, all my mistakes, you just think I'll never work again. I mean, as an actor, that's why you do a retake, and for writers, I just think it is so difficult. They're exposed on a first outing, and then they're either binned or so much work that's done in development with writers that aren't paid, like writers in general, male or female, aren't paid in development in this. I mean, the amount of work that's expected to be done by a writer for nothing, I think, is horrific.
It is.
And people have to pay bills, and also, I mean, one of the things I adore about my job is it's a collaboration and the collaborative experience, and working with HODs that are brilliant, and actors, and that the story grows and changes all of the time. You have to respond to something that's in the script, and then it has to grow, and and that's the beauty of the process. But it's like getting those reading those scripts that are by women. I mean, the couple of writers' rooms I've been in, 3 of the shows have been a single writer, which is most unusual, and it's been a male. The show that I've just done has 3 people in the writing room, 1 male and 2 females. But he's the and they serve him, and actually even watching the politics in the room, it's about that as well. And yeah, I mean, I think that's. I wouldn't say the male voice, because I mean, basically he's the key writer, and he would normally write the 8 of them, but he has brought in, and it's been interesting watching the difference in, say, the younger female writer, how her power and confidence has grown from season 1 to season 2, and how he hangs on it. I mean, very interesting in a way that, she was kind of younger and in training. And I suppose the point being, work makes work. Experience, you have to mess up. You have to, which certainly people would comment that maybe some other directors don't have this. Oh, I don't know, or what do you, let's just do that again. I don't think, let's just try this, as in not, of course, as a director, you have to lead and be clear, but not be absolute. Yeah. There has to be, that you can, as Donald McCann famously said, the theatre is the actor's medium, and screen is the director's medium. But it is collaborative, and just basically, work makes work, and just the work has to be written in the first place, then has to be responded to and written and made, and then remade.
I think the difference, just having worked in RTE myself as well, that there are times when you realise that not enough time is given to writers to develop the scripts and the stories. It's like, okay, they don't get the funding in time, and then suddenly they have to start having, say, 6 episodes done in, I don't know, 2 months. And really, they're not given enough time. And they have people interfering. Sometimes they have these amazing writers, and then they're interfered with, so their script is neutered. So I think in terms of that, for television in Ireland, except for the independent production companies, if they're able to keep control, we've seen huge successes with, various different dramas because the writer maintained control. And that's really important because there are so superb writers. And that's, in fact, where, in some ways, Waking the Feminists came from, was the lack of, we know the women writers are out there. We know that they're really, really talented. They're just not getting the opportunities. And it is about this unconscious bias and that we all have. It's not just a male-female thing. It's just we're so used to seeing so few women out there, on the world stage. We see them as models, as beauties, as, film stars. But when you really look at the data, it boils down to, okay, it's not necessarily the image we want our daughters, our granddaughters to be soaking in. It's not particularly a healthy image.
And can I just say on that, because finance does play a huge part, is that the people who are sometimes making financial decisions, because the money is big, again speaking from kind of TV and film, there's an element of a sure thing of, what's the form? Do you know what the track record is? Can you deliver? And so traditionally, because it has been more male dominated, the choices are going there instead of kind of just taking a chance. Because I know somebody took a chance with me and the chance, paid off. And it is about take a chance, and because everybody can do the job. And, it's just people do it in different ways. And then the job also is about not the job description itself, but finding your voice within the job. And because, any of us can, put any directors up, we can all do a version of the story. So it's about your sensibility and having your confidence of what your sensibility is and presenting that with confidence. And I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they were saying, I've gone for this, but, they went for the guy, or, I went for this job, but they went for the person with more experience. I go for jobs all the time that they pick the person above me. Like, that is life. Life is always there's somebody better, somebody faster, somebody funnier, somebody cheaper, somebody more beautiful, whatever it is. There's always something to, and I think just you have to remove that negativity and it's just present, and at least go into a room and go, well, if they choose me, they'll know what they're getting. Do you know that you can get your voice or present or have confidence about what your voice is, and that your voice matters? And I think that is, because otherwise then it does become a formulaic, where, and I know there's lots of shows that you can't see the director's hand, but the director's hand can be seen in so many different ways, and obviously subtlety performance, but choices that are made, like you've talked about here, and it's a very...
It's really important. It is a director's medium. As an actor, I would never watch rushes. I really don't want to watch rushes. You know if a scene, the minute you begin a scene, if you're going to reach what you're... As an actor, you just instinctively know, I'm not going to reach where I need to go, but time is precious, so you don't waste, Only a few times it was John Gielgud gave this advice about... because obviously film, television, theatre was his medium, but when you're doing, and this is when film was very expensive, so you couldn't waste time doing take after take after take. So when he would start off something and he knew he wasn't going to reach where he wanted to go himself in the scene, he would deliberately fuck up and then curse really badly so that they couldn't use it. And he said, to use that very sparingly. And I don't know any actor who doesn't use that. It's very rare because you're a professional and you want to get it. If you always know sometimes the first take is the best, but the director will be the one to choose. And you have to trust the director. You kind of go, well, you're watching it, and if the director says that's good or that's fine, then that's great. And they're usually, if you really feel you want to go again, that you could do better, you will ask and say, could we go again? And it all depends on time. It's very expensive. One of the things that interests me, and I'd love your opinion on this, is the Nordic television, which to me is just sublime. I have a sister who lives in Denmark, and so I've visited there quite often, and the gender balance is just taken for granted in every area in life. And I happened to be over there during elections. Now, I don't understand a word of Danish, but I was watching it on the TV, and it's just millions of women just being elected, and it was they were everywhere, and nobody was batting an eyelid and all of that. And there was no discussion, because I had to keep getting her to translate. What are they saying? Oh, they're just being elected, it's boring. And then Borgen came out, and that just blew me away. It was phenomenal. I'd be watching it and I'd forget I didn't speak Danish. I'd want to go and make a cup of tea, and I'd go, oh no, subtitles, I have to keep watching it. It was superb, but it's taken for granted. And that's basically what we would all like. As well, I would, I love the thing that you're going to include age in there. That's my thing. But it's something I would love. Just that take for granted that you're just going to see loads of women and loads of men everywhere. Oh, yeah.
We've set up WEA with Jennie, but I'm just thinking, so 3 years ago we set it up, and when we started, our first sort of meeting, we put out questionnaires to everybody who turned up, just what are the topics that you would want to discuss the most. And one of the ones that came up most was, how do I have children and keep this industry and still keep in the industry as well. And there was a lot of younger girls who were sort of looking at how they build up their career and going, how am I do want to have kids, some people obviously do, some people don't, but the ones who do, I do want to have kids, but I still want to, and how am I going to, and it was something that frightened a lot of them, we thought. And now a lot of us in the animation industry have kids, and you just kind of work around things, but it does have an impact as well. It's just sort of I just like to get kind of people's thoughts on that, and obviously that when people are hiring women, I think that sometimes comes into, depending on the project, the length of time, whatever. But it is a big issue. Yeah.
Huge issue. Yeah, it's one of those things. I know that Waking the Feminists, a group of writers and various different practitioners got together because they had the same issue about having to take a back seat because they had children, and childcare is so expensive. In Denmark, just to go on again about Denmark, but they have a wonderful model, big companies. I've often wondered why the National Theatre doesn't have a creche, why the Doll doesn't have a creche. They should have, it should be par for the course. In Denmark, big companies have creches, so nobody has to worry about this issue at all. And that's but if we had more women in politics, and it would help fathers as well. There's an awful lot of fathers who are dealing with the same issue. But in general, these are issues that really need to be addressed. And if we did have more women in politics making these decisions, I think it would be addressed a lot quicker, And it's a difficult one, especially being freelance, It's almost impossible, especially in theatre and things where you're working day and night. It's very, very, very difficult. And some women have to bow out completely. I'm going to hand that question over to you guys.
Yeah, a lot of change really comes about by having women in positions of power within the studios and within the companies. And you can see the evolution of it. In our studio for a very long time, it's been going for 22 years, but it was set up by two guys who were only 21, 22 at the time. So it was a very young employee base. And we got to about 4 years ago and realized, so the company was 16, 17 years old, and realized that no woman had ever, there'd been no maternity leave ever. No one had a baby while in employment. And so when the first women started having babies, it was like, oh my, how are we going to deal? And it really, we were all watching, and it was around the same time that Women in Animation started. We were all watching, and funnily enough, life went on. They went on maternity leave. It's all the more ironic when you're making cartoons for small children, where, you would see a lot of the guys had children, and to see how it kind of reinvigorated their creativity and their storytelling. So many of the parents have come in, and people do that whether they have children or not, but really observing kids, especially the male artists, using their kids for animation reference, all that kind of stuff. It really reinvigorated the studio. And has just been embraced now. And over time, our senior producers have gone on maternity leave and are coming back, and the world has not fallen to bits. And again, it's just the norm. Having heads of departments that are female, we all know, some people are going to have children, and that's just the way it is. So it's just normalization and also visibility. We were worried about it because we had never seen someone, take maternity, and then they did. And then that's okay. You've an example. So I just think it's really about having women leading shows, whether that's in production, from the animation point of view, whether that's as writing showrunners, as lead writers, as directors, art directors, heads of production, knowing that there's a path for you, and knowing that these women have negotiated the same obstacles that you have, or are likely to encounter. And they've got through it, and the world didn't crumble. It's just leading by example.
It's really important. There's women in film and television groups all around the world now. And it's just really important because you feel part of something, because it is an isolating industry at times. You're working on separate projects, and then you have this intense burst where you're all working together, and then everybody goes their way. So you make, it can be quite a lonely experience. So having a networking group where you can just feel I'm part of a community, even if you're not working, because you can't work all the time. It would be boring, really, if you had to work all the time. You need creative industries. You need a little break, a little self-reflection.
It's slightly different in animation because if you're working in film or even in TV, there might be a very small group working in a production office for months, years on end. Yeah. And then there's, a series of, 2 months where everyone's on set, and that's very intense, and you build all your relationships, on those early mornings. Whereas in animation, it's like we're on set all day, every day. A production's around 20 months, and you'll have the entire crew working there every day together.
Your family, then you become family.
Yeah, but it just means that it's a little easier to form those communities and have those conversations when you see each other every single day. And it's not all in the hype of production or filming. Yeah. But going back to your question, I think being able to just have an organisation that can have these conversations and normalise these conversations is really important.
Yeah. I was just wondering. Yes, I was just going to ask about it.
Hi, Margaret Ward again. You mentioned, Dearbhla, that there's a huge lack of women writers in Ireland, and I wonder what can be done to address that.
Well, I guess kind of there are two things of us, the Irish, what I mean is by writers who are, their work has been made and getting paid work, because I think there are lots of female writers. So I think it's about conscious decisions to commission a writer. I mean, it all has to be about story anyhow. So it's a bit cart before the horse by you're a woman, so therefore what do you want to write? I mean, so much writing and so much development comes out of relationships between producers and writers, directors and writers. And I know, for example, just on the subject of, women in these roles, when I had my company with this with this woman who is a writer, I mean, the reality is, in our experience, I'm sorry to say, but children got in the way, in the sense that she could not, and I know in the job, and when I say that comes like children are a problem, that's not but the reality is she needed to take time out to they made a choice, she and her partner, about having children, and she was not able to commit in the same way. Now, really interesting ideas, but she couldn't, do the meetings, do the work. I was kind of presenting the work, and I definitely know, with, regret with a small R, but I definitely I couldn't work the way I do if I had children. I would need a really, obviously, supportive partner and all of that, but beyond that, what sort of mother do I want to be is also, because I've kind of obviously gone through all of these, soul-searching questions at a time when, I had to kind of make some final choices. And because so much of my work is abroad, or I choose to live in Ireland and I work abroad, is, do I want to be away from home mother? And so it's very complex, I think, the whole how you manage having children and your career. And I think it's one of the reasons why in TV, particularly in Britain, there are so many women in management, and having worked in the BBC and in RTE, because the hours and the management structure works for women who have children, because you can come in at 9 and you can go home at 6, and most, like RTE has a crash. So I'm just taking very conventional models there. And I think it's one of the ways where, working mothers have actually found, a voice and a power within the industry by combining the two. But certainly, yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's obviously, there are lots of female directors, but in terms of working female directors that I know in Britain, and I think I know one who has children. I'm sure there are lots, but anyhow, how they manage it.
I'm just trying to think. I know a few, but none of them have children.
It's a sacrifice.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, just following up on that. So that's addressing the problem, but the solution. So, for example, we have seen some solutions in this area around blind commissioning rounds. Mm-hmm. For everything, so that it is always about the story and it's not about the person's name. We've seen funds being set up for female writers. A very significant one, I think, recently was set up. And also, insisting that there are more women in the writers' room, just insisting on it as a part of the industry practice. So
that's certainly what in our room, again, it's coming back to simple choices, but in animation, there's certainly more male writers working than female. But over time, especially if you have, once creator voices get heard and you have creators show running their own shows and they're female, and they will hire more females, and those people get work, and that work is proven and it gets on screen, and that perpetuates the system. But for me, working in development, I just again, that unconscious bias is there, so I check myself and look at the writer's room, and you count, and if there's 8 people in the room, it's 4 and 4. You've just got to make it happen yourself. And it doesn't always happen, especially as a creator-led show. You love the show, you obviously will go for the right writer, but people who are commissioning or developing and producing have to make that choice. They just have to force themselves to look at things a little differently and take that extra box. And then you see it rolling. You can see it so quickly. I can even see it in our work over the last 5 years. Writers who get their first break on a show, build their confidence, they're on screen. Ultimately, if the episode works, the producers and commissioners aren't going to ask questions next time. They've done it once, they can do it again. So, that's what I do. I just make myself make this up.
I think we have time for 3 more quick questions.
Okay, well, I was just going to say it's interesting when you talk about childcare, because if it's, we naturally all talk about female directors, and if they have kids and how difficult it is, and nobody ever asks that question about a male director. So it's inbuilt.
And how difficult it is for them.
Yeah, or let's say you're hiring a director. Nobody would not hire the director because he had kids. Whereas, a producer might think in their mind, oh shit, she has, 2 young kids. God, what would happen if one of them got sick? Or
I don't know if that's. I don't know if that's not the point I was making anyhow. And I don't know, because I certainly never sit in a seat and think, oh God, she has kids. That influences my choice of that person. And you do have to sometimes, go, you can't have the meeting when you want. It can't happen once because that person has childcare, and you go, well, that's, the world has to continue in that.
Certainly.
But my issue was about looking at myself, my own choice about how I want.
No, I understand that. I understand that, but I'm just saying that the conversation, men would never, they would never be asked that question, or it would never come up. So it's like, exactly. Yeah, no. But I'm just saying that nobody seems to ask male directors about that, or they never even talk about it, how tough it, So it's a brilliant dialogue to have. But I mean, I certainly have had experiences where I haven't got a job because I had kids. But look, everybody has different systems. But what I'm also saying is that women in film and television existed here 20 years ago, and we were all talking about the same things that we're talking about now. So there is an awful lot of work to be done. And, the danger is, when you talk about, let's say, Sheryl Sandberg saying lean into a system, I mean, there's nothing wrong with my work. I don't need to lean into a male patriarchal system. I would like to, say things, and I feel I have stories that are important. So there is a danger, because sometimes women become, even if they are in high positions, they can become chief of staff to a male patriarchal system. So we do have to continue talking.
Thank you. Sorry. It's good exercise.
Hi, Sarah Kieran, and I'm on the board of Women in Film and Television. And I think one of the things that we are looking for is for all of the commissioners and the broadcasters and the film board to engage in unconscious bias training. Sorry. Yeah, and I think that's really important. And if it's one thing that we all take from today, it is the one thing that they can do that can make a difference, and it's not a big thing to do.
Absolutely. I think, the research and the data that you showed earlier should be required viewing for every commissioner and broadcaster. It's certainly in Ireland, very simple thing. It's a small industry. Put that in front of them and see if it influences them. It certainly influenced us in the creative choices we made. So, it's a simple step, and it can be really impactful.
I'm just interested in some advice from you, Dearbhla. I work with a lot of young women in Maynooth University in the Department of Media Studies, where actually they're taught exclusively by women in production, and that's a very conscious bias to do that with them. But I'm really interested when they go as new entrants into the media industries, because there's 30% female employees in Irish media industries, only 12% of decision makers in Irish media are female. What advice do you give to them?
Keep doing it, keep fighting, keep presenting your voice. I mean, the work, I believe, speaks ultimately for itself. The work speaks, be it your writing, be it your directing, be it your music playing work. You never don't employ somebody who you don't love their work, because the person at the top wants to look fabulous, and they can only look fabulous when they've got even as a director making that choice. So that's one thing. The second thing is, it involves a huge amount of politics, people politics, to survive. Half it is talent and half it is politics. How to win, picking your battles. What are the ones I can let that go because that isn't going to, but this I'm going to fight for. And I have been very many times in that situation, in an edit suite with Richard Curtis, who's just going, he wants this, and I'm going, okay, Richard, how are we going to move forward? Because I disagree with you. I think it should be this. I said, but you're the executive producer and I'm the director, so you get to trump me. So, but how are we going to move forward in this? And he was like, So, I mean, the politics of how you deal with people, and whether that's confrontational or whether that's diplomatic. I mean, it's painful, but it is like surviving in your family. And that's a kind of, I see the work we do, the stories we tell are all about dysfunction. They're all about, we all want to be loved, we all want to love. You want to kill your sister, or your mother has fucked it all up for you, or whatever it is. And that is what the working organism is like. It's a constant negotiation. So I think politics and how you are with people, your sensibility, actually just being nice sometimes as well. Just simple things of being grateful to people, that the driver is as important a person on the set. I mean, it's some very, very simple things. And I mean, I would say my greatest role model has been my mother. You know, and then because from a family of 4, 2 boys and 2 girls, we were brought up the boys had to cook, we had to leave the bins out, I had to collect the milk. You know, it was. But I also grew up in a small town where, growing up and, you know, brought up by the nuns, where we weren't taught to question in the same way. But my mother was married at 25, so I was going, how am I going to work? How am I going to get everything done? And, you know, do what I want to do, travel, do the work I want to do, and then, you know, have it all done by 25, because that's when I get married and have children. You know, my life was obviously, there was a lot not going on in my head at that time about how not in touch I was. But that is, you know, unconscious, you know, prejudice and bias. And I mean, every day I am grateful, or every job, and choose work specifically to challenge me, or, you know, and also bring, I mean, I think I work a lot abroad. I find I am so advantaged by being Irish, by being a woman, and also by being gay. I mean, I really feel those as things that I don't have to compromise in the workplace. And, you know, obviously it's been a long journey, and I still have a huge amount to go. So, I mean, I suppose, what can you do? It's about being, as well as and how you are to be with. It's like being with, you know, as I say, family or your lover. It is, everybody wants to be with somebody who, you know, it works, so you can find a voice, so you can make music, and that's why I think it's half politics and half talent.
I have a different answer for that, because you're to build on what you're saying, because you're talking about kids who haven't even gotten out of the gate. So there are massive studies in the United States out of Harvard and Stanford and all those schools. One from Stanford is, act confident and you will come across confident even if you don't believe it. So how you sit in a chair, you know, how you don't fiddle with your hair. So it's really fake it and you will be it. And they have proof on that. Secondly is, I can only speak to the United States. Women tend to check off every single box when it comes to the job requirements, and men don't. Third, specific to the entertainment industry, is women have to learn how to pitch better. So for students, I really think it's about confidence. It's about a numbers game, going for every job, whether they have experience or not, and it's being very confident in how they pitch themselves. And that's different. It's one thing to learn the art of the craft. It's a very different thing on how you present yourself. And I don't think the film schools or that have that part of it. It's the psychological game, where I think for guys, it'll be like, oh, I don't have any experience, I'll just go for that. Yeah. And so, and this gets back to what we were talking at the coffee break. This word strong female role model. I hate the word strong, and I hate the word role model. It is the absolute worst thing to put next to the word woman. Because now you've taken the experience of this, and now you've made it this. And that's a stereotype that's perpetuated. And it's horrible. So it's the psychological game that I think students, in particular women, coming out of, I don't care whether it's B school or film school, it's that psychological game that they need to know, because you just have to be confident. It's like, what is it, go big or go home kind of thing? Mm-hmm. It's kind of that, especially coming out of school.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, and I've heard a lot of, I didn't go to art school myself, but a lot of people saying that, students saying that ticking every box is something that female students, I'm generalizing here obviously, would really push themselves, work really hard, fulfill every single module, you know, put in every essay and art project, whereas some of the male students will go, yeah, I can learn more from YouTube, and will go and, you know, start doing tutorials and teaching themselves things outside the course, feeding that into their, you know, their final year film, and whereas the female students are just trying to, you know, get those A's, and they are not, they might have fantastic exam results, but the guys will have knowledge of, brand new cutting edge technology that is available out there. It's on YouTube, it's available to everyone, and they're looking. Ultimately, that's going to get them the job before the girls who've just kind of done very well and did everything they were supposed to do. And so it's a hard thing because you're asking people to do everything. You want to do well, you want to do the exams, but also do more. But a lot of the male students they mightn't fulfill all those modules. They'll do something else. It's having the confidence to go, this is going to benefit me more. And then really about pitching yourself, and this goes to not just pitching yourself as a director or a creator or an artist, but pitching your ideas and your projects, and not starting everything, well, it's just a little idea I had, or it's just really getting out there and pitching your ideas with confidence, and also seeking advice, going out there and asking other women, can you help me with how to pitch, without how to develop a project, without how to, make my animation better, or whatever it might be. Seeking advice is something that we found it in women in animation. There's easily as many men and young men students come to those events easily as women, sometimes even more. And it'll be the male students who will be up there seeking advice, and the women standing back. And that has changed again, even over the last year and a half. It's amazing how quickly things can change if you're just given the forum to do it. But that will be my advice.
Brilliant. We're just about to wrap up now, and I want... Oh, yeah. Yeah. Good point. I'd also like to mention, Margaret Ward, you have that Women on Air, is it? Women on Air. It's a wonderful... it kind of tracks how all the different... We've all listened to radio and all the all-male panels. It was so ludicrous one year in the UK that they had 2 men who were asked to... Well, imagine you're a woman with breast cancer, because they didn't have a female on the panel. So it's a wonderful one where they actually... maybe you'd like to say something before we wrap up, because I think for people who are interested in networking and interested in getting ideas out there...
Thanks very much. I'll be very brief. Hi. I think I already know some of the people in the room. Women on Air was founded in 2010, and there were none really of these organizations in 2010, with the exception of Women in Technology and Science, which has been going for, I think, 25 years, and they deserve a big mention. But it was basically designed to address the lack of female visibility on the airwaves. So that's radio and television, and of course, print does come into it as well, but mainly radio and television. It has kind of a 5-tiered strategy, which is to have a list of women who are available to producers and researchers to go on the airwaves. You add yourself to that list on the website, so feel free to go on. And I know Dara Doyle, who's here, he said that a lot of the invite list from today was built on the names that were on that Women on Air website. So that's number one. The number 2 thing is to lobby people about this and keep it front and center. And I think one of the most important bits of what we do, and we've done it from the start, is to collect the data. And Anne, you're here. You did some work on that as well, Anne's an academic. You have to show the numbers, right? So as a financial journalist, I was always like, show me the facts. And a big part of what we do is busting myths. So put it in front of people and bust it by showing them the reality of what they say. They still might not listen. A lot of them aren't listening, but you kind of just keep saying it over and over again, and eventually, it gets through. Networking is a really big part of that, having women from across all of these interests. So it's for female experts. So everybody in this room is pretty much a female expert in what they do. So you can go and you can learn from people. And there's also a fantastic mentor or training program. And now I haven't been part of the organization for 2 years, but they're running the mentor program. I think they just ran one recently. Leanne, you were on that. So keep your eye on the website and participate and get involved. And remember, it's across every industry. And there are about 35 to 40 professional women's organizations operating in Ireland now, but in their own little sphere. I would say all come together and talk to each other. You'll have more power collectively.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm going to hand you over to Rachel now, and thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our amazing panel. So thank you all so much. So to Ger Ryan, our moderator, Dearbhla Walsh, Madeline Di Nonno and Jennie Stacey. I think a couple of things have become really clear from a really exciting morning, which has gone on into the afternoon, is that there's a huge amount to say. And I would echo what Margaret was saying, is that, and Leand, you know, to speak across the different spheres and across the different areas of expertise. And on that note, we're going to have a networking session outside the doors. We'll have to leave the comforting red zone. And to continue the conversation. And please do, if you're interested in joining up with Women in Film and Television, we have membership forums outside. You can follow us. We're now trending on Twitter, so thanks everyone who's been tweeting online. And let's keep the conversation going and keep the momentum going. Thank you.